All right. Thank you all for showing up today. I know it's not the most exciting topic, bureaucracy. You came to a session that has bureaucracy in the title, so you're all very brave to be here today.
Okay. Just point it towards the computer.
Okay. This is an equally exciting picture. We've all seen this huge pile of paperwork. We've all had to go through the forms, through the red tape. We've all had to deal with lengthy approval processes, you know, everything that bureaucracy brings with it. It's not the most exciting topic. It's not a very engaging topic, but it is an important topic because it helps us be compliant. Another great word people love. But I actually want to challenge this idea of bureaucracy as this necessary evil that we have to deal with. As you know, if you work for a public institution or another big organization, you usually have to deal with bureaucracy in some way or form in your day-to-day. But what if we challenge this and actually treat it as more of a foundation for trust? If we actually talk about bureaucracy in a way that also gives it justice in the way that it helps us be compliant with rules, yes, but more importantly, how these rules are actually embedding public values and fundamental rights that we want to protect. So yeah, how can we build a foundation for trust through compliance? At FeedbackFruits, we're a private company. We do that in several ways. I won't go into all of the ways that we deal with building trust through compliance right now. I won't really have time to go through all of that, but if you're interested in that, we have a web page that you can go to. We go through sort of the basics of privacy and security. How do we make sure that, you know, we manage those basic compliance requirements, but then also beyond that, how do we make sure we have environmental sustainability in place? How do we build trust in all sorts of ways? Today I actually want to focus on a specific area that we build trust in, which is in the area of AI. In this area, we especially focus on the AI Act, and I'm sure some of you, probably most of you at this point, will have heard of the AI Act published by the EU. It is not fully enforced yet. It's been published about a year ago, pretty much exactly actually, this month. It's, again, not fully enforced yet as a legislation. It's quite a new thing, even though it's been in place for a year. But as I mentioned, we are currently in the entry into force phase. And we are sort of in the middle of that phase. Some obligations apply already, some don't yet. And we're also in the phase where we don't really know what it's actually going to look like. What is the enforcement going to look like? There's still some guidelines that are coming that we are waiting for patiently. But overall, we don't know enough yet about the AI Act, especially not what it means in practice. And even though it's only been published for a year, it's not fully enforced yet. We've already heard a lot of complaints, actually, a lot of criticism about the AI Act. It's been criticized as overly bureaucratic, as hampering innovation because it's impossible to follow already, because it's in a period where we need to be innovative in the AI sphere and where we need to act fast, otherwise we will be left behind, especially also in Europe. Yeah, it's not been hailed as a great example of legislation everywhere. Some people love it, some people hate it. But so what we want to do now, because we are in this space of uncertainty of how it's going to look like, we could just lay back, keep building innovative tools, and disregard of the compliance requirements, because they don't apply yet and we don't really know what they're going to look like actually. Instead, we actually signed up to the AI Pact, which is an initiative by the European Commission, published for exactly that reason. So it's this initiative that helps bring together private actors, public organizations, all sorts of people in the ecosystem, to actually discuss commitments that we want to make when it comes to trustworthy AI, and to make sure that everyone has an AI governance strategy in place, everyone fulfills those basic commitments that are necessary to safeguard human rights while also publishing innovative technology. You can also visit our pledge for what exactly we signed up for. I've included some links here. But before I go into that a bit more, I want to discuss what the AI Act actually is. What does it mean for education specifically, because it's quite a broad piece of legislation, so specific sectors are impacted differently. In general, the AI Act is based on a risk-based approach. That means that AI applications, AI systems will fall within within one of the 4 categories you see here. Minimal or no risk, which is not regulated at all. Limited risk, which is regulated through transparency obligations. And then high risk, which is regulated quite heavily through all sorts of compliance requirements. And we have unacceptable risk, which is prohibited. So again, as I mentioned, this impacts different sectors differently. Education is a specific sector because we as a society have decided that education is quite important. It has a big impact on our future and our present. It impacts a lot of people in a very impactful way. So for this reason, there are specific examples that the legislation actually specifically mentions for education. Starting at the top, for unacceptable risk, for example, we have systems that are used to infer emotions in education. That's strictly prohibited. Then for high risk, which is really focused around systems that pose significant risk to the health, safety, or fundamental rights of any person. Things like scoring of exams, especially when they are used to determine access to an education or a career path, are considered high risk and are strictly regulated. And then on limited risk, which is focused on systems that pose risk, especially when it comes to the lack of transparency around using an AI. So for example, you can think of a chatbot. If you don't know that you're interacting with a chatbot, that comes with certain risk. And so the obligations around there are around transparently sharing that you are, that the person is interacting with a chatbot. And then minimal or no risk is things like spam filters, which again isn't regulated. And interestingly enough, most applications will actually fall within the minimal or no risk category. They, do a lot of things, but might not actually cause a lot of risk. So the EU decided to not regulate them. On prohibited AI practices, again, I mentioned the issue of AI systems to infer emotions. I won't go into too much depth here. This is quite a nuanced topic, but if you are interested in this, please come see me. I love talking about it. It's a very controversial thing because some institutions actually do infer emotions already through certain ways. So it is a question of what falls within this provision and what doesn't. I do want to go a bit more in depth on the high risk because it is a very nitty-gritty topic, and the legislation actually points out several areas that fall under high risk explicitly. Again, one of which is determining access to an education or vocational training, evaluating learning outcomes, especially when they assess a certain level of education, but also monitoring and detecting prohibited behavior during tests, for example. Again, this is very explicit. Legislation is usually not this explicit, but in this case it really is. Again, because education is such a high-risk field in general. But with all rules, there come exceptions. And with this one, it's also really interesting to see this approach because it's a very pragmatic approach, and it actually encourages a case-by-case analysis of, does this application really cause risk to the fundamental rights of people? And when it doesn't actually fall within high risk. So it's a very sort of pragmatic approach to assess whether something is prohibited or not, or whether something is regulated or not. So for example, if an AI system performs a very small or procedural task, it doesn't fall under high risk. If it only improves the outcome of something a human has already done, it doesn't fall under high risk. If it detects patterns in something that a human has done, a bit more nuanced, but also might not fall under high risk. And also if it only helps prepare an assessment, for example. So this gives us really interesting insights into what we can actually do to build trustworthy AI. And this is also where I want to hand it over to Felix, our senior designer actually, who implements these rules that we learned from the AI Act into actual designs from the ground up that we then can use to share innovation with our users without harming them in any significant way, or actually just provide them with a nice service. Handing it over to you, Felix.
Thank you, Franziska. Yeah, so how does the rubber hit the road? I'd love to talk you through some of the ethical AI design principles used at FeedbackFruits. We've been using these for quite a while, and when we signed up for the AI Pact, we are actually quite happy to see these align quite closely with the legislation proposed by the EU. We have quite some ways that we apply AI within FeedbackFruits, but I've brought you the most spicy one, only the best for you guys, because we don't have time to go through all of them. I'll talk about AI-assisted grading of student discussion contributions. Now, I hope that if you hear something like AI-based grading of students, that should concern you a little bit. At least it concerns me a little bit. And personally, I'm quite happy to see that there is legislation to mediate applications of AI, especially when it comes to, for example, grading. Now, risk really depends on design. So I always recommend to everyone, when you talk about assessing risk, have a look about how it really works. So let's do some mental model building. Imagine you're a teacher and you're grading some students. In this case, this is an application where teachers grade students. In this case, the teacher is grading Marie Curie. On the left, we have a rubric to assess her on her discussion skills on a topic, for example, staying on topic at various levels. Then on the right, we see all her discussion contributions to the discussion space. So how does AI come into this picture? Because we've already supported this before we start applying AI here. This is Akai, our little AI mascot, a little robot here in purple and blue, and it receives all the students' contributions to the discussion space, and then analyzes these based on the rubric that's provided by the teacher. So I'll pause for 1 second, because do we just apply AI grading to students without asking a teacher or an institution? No, of course not. As you can see, institutions are always in control, and we always clearly use Akai in the same terminology when talking about AI features, and we give them the option to disable or enable the application of AI in an institution, depending on the risk appetites. And we offer a lot of disclosure around that as well. If you would click on that little info icon, that would open up our help center article. You can look this up online already. And there we go into some often brought up compliance concerns, like, for example, hey, do you guys use student data for training AI models? No, at FeedbackFruits, we made hella sure that with all our contracts, student data is never sent or saved for AI training. So that's just one of the ways in which, in this case, for example, institutions as a stakeholder, we apply these principles, like, for example, transparency about use of AI, always ensuring data ownership, and ensuring that educators and institutions remain in control. Now, okay, so say Akai is done with analyzing the discussion contributions and then passes it off to the teacher. Again, how does that look? Because risk is based on design. So here again we have the rubric for assessing the student based on the discussion skills. And normally a teacher would click one of these levels based on what they see, and we surface the AI suggestion here at the bottom. And if you click on that, the teacher would get some more information about how this suggestion came to be. So again, here you see some principles, but now applied to the teacher. Again, at transparency, we again clearly disclose that with the same branding of Akai that here an AI feature is present. And there's we go also beyond the legislation to offer some interpretability of how this came to be, so they can understand what was driving that. Now, maybe as a teacher, you agree with that looks good, and you decide to select that. Then it goes out to the student, and also here we see some principles applied. Human in the loop. The teacher is in the loop of decision making here, which complies with legislation, but we also went a step above this. We don't just allow a teacher to blanket accept all these suggestions without having a look for it. So because it's a high risk application, as we see it at least, we also require the explicit sign-off as an extra step. Now, maybe that's a harsh grade. Maybe it was a harsh grade, so the student gets a 1 out of 5. Student then opens it up to see how did this come to be. And again, here we offer that disclosure that this is a teacher decision, but an AI-based suggestion was presented to the teacher. So they have the insight of how this came to be. So again, to the student, this case is a stakeholder. We see this really often. The student is often forgotten. We don't sell to the student, but we really want to make sure that we also have that student stakeholder in mind. It's transparency about the presence of an AI feature. Hope you're okay. Some interpretability of how this came to be, and again here, because we feel this is kind of unknown territory and want to tread carefully, we go beyond the compliance and offer also critically the right to object. So you see at the bottom, there's a button to object to this grading decision. And as a student, you can offer some additional context. You send it off to the teacher, and then you have not just the grade, but also that extra context added by the students. Teacher might receive this as an email or as a notification within FeedbackFruits, opens it up. And again, this might be some time later, so to mediate this process, they need the full context, the full chain of events. What was the grade? Actually, it was AI grading assistance being applied here, so that's clear. And there's the objection by the students with some extra context. Now maybe the teacher, they were a little hasty, they were a lot of time pressure, as they often were, and didn't have a good look. And now, in hindsight, maybe this wasn't too fair, and they feel like the student was actually right in their objection. They can decide to override this, send it back to the student, who undoubtedly is very happy about that. And so here you see also that these principles, like for example the student right to object, also involve the teacher and keeps them in the loop. Oh, sorry. So this is one of the many ways that we apply AI in FeedbackFruits. We invest quite a bit to de-risk these kind of applications to hopefully earn your trust. This is very much in development, so please let us know what do you care about, because your input is really valued. And I'll give it back to Franziska.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, just to close it off, I hope this gave you an example of how we can actually use sort of something that seems very stringent, like a compliance requirement that is based on the AI Act, and that might just create some rules and regulations and, in the end, red tape and bureaucracy in the day-to-day of a designer, for example. But then actually, if we turn that around and use it as something that informs designs and actually makes us think creatively about how we can do things in a better, more trustworthy way, it can actually create a meaningful conversation about how we can protect users better and create trust between different organizations that then hopefully supercharge innovation in the education field. Again, if you want to know more about what we do at FeedbackFruits to build that trust in different areas, but also in AI, you can check out our website. And we also have a trust center that specifically is targeted for sort of the compliance requirements, the nitty-gritty of how we go into that. I saw some people put QR codes on their slides. That would have been very smart, because now you guys can't actually see that. But these slides will be publicly available after through TNC, so you can see it then. If you're curious about it before, do hit me up. I can give you the link as well. Again, this is a sneak peek of our website around trust. And then here's the more compliance-focused, more nitty-gritty area that you can also look through. So to wrap it up, thank you so much again for joining bravely a session on bureaucracy and compliance and all the boring stuff. We hope that this informed you to some extent and also gave you some fruit for thought. We are really curious to hear your feedback, your thoughts. Challenge us, please. We can't do it alone, and we want to hear your input. We want to be a trustworthy partner, so that only works if we also know what other people care about. We have our own ideas, but it's more interesting to have a meaningful conversation about it. So thank you.
Thank you. So, any questions for Franziska, Felix? Yep.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a question about the AI Pact that you mentioned. I mean, I don't know if I got it right. It's a European-wide initiative, or and how that more or less relates to the AI Pact in terms of feedback, or how the two things interplay. That was my question.
Yeah. So the AI Pact is an initiative by the European Commission. Exactly. It's an initiative to ensure compliance, but also to ensure guidelines are set up in a way that works for the ecosystem, actually. So players, again, have a lot of feedback about what is doable and what isn't doable, what is too much red tape, what actually hampers innovation and what doesn't. And so this is sort of an initiative to, before the entire act is in force, to start that conversation early so that then the guidelines are based on the feedback by the industry. And different private actors are signed up to the pact, but also public institutions like universities or major players like Microsoft have signed up for the pledge as well. So then that exchange happens before it actually is in force.
Any more questions?
So one more hand going up.
If we do a procurement, because in education we don't usually make our own systems, we make maybe the back end, but to make things work in infrastructure, but if we do procurement, do you have any suggestions for, I mean, this is coming pretty soon, and I'm sure that there's new procurements coming out. Do you have any suggestions for what to look out for, or how to make the procurement?
Yeah, ask the difficult questions. I think that's, you know, I mean, you can do the checkbox approach. You can absolutely check, is this vendor compliant with this, is it compliant with that, and there will be frameworks around this. Just like with the GDPR, you can very easily do a sort of checkbox approach. But whether that is actually meaningfully compliant, and whether it is, you know, someone you want to work with and someone you want to trust students with, student data with as well, that's really more of a conversation, because in the end you need to have more insight into that and maybe more access than you will just receive via document, for example. So really dig deep, ask the meaningful questions, and challenge the vendors, I would say.
Thank you. Any questions now? All right, thank you. So, keeping